distinguished guests, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the Beijing Financial Street to attend this 2023 Financial Street Forum Annual Conference and the closing ceremony. Warm welcome. With the great support of the co-organizers as well as the co-host, and with the joint efforts of national financial management departments and financial institutions and the guests attending the meeting, the 2023 Financial Street Forum Annual Meeting will now conclude its agenda, and we will conclude the session with the theme of a better China and a better world, strengthening financial cooperation toward a bright future. We have attracted more than 400 eminent guests from more than 30 countries and regions from around the world to be with us in the past 3 days. And we have discussed the current economic and financial hot topics, and also we discussed about how we can contribute the wisdom and the strengths to the real economy development, and also to share and contribute our wisdom. This year marks the beginning of the first year to implement the spirit of the party's 20th NPC, and also the 45th anniversary of the opening up and reform. President Xi has pointed out that reform and opening up is an important magic weapon for China to catch up with the times, and a key move to determine the fate of the contemporary China. At the recently concluded China Central Financial Work Conference, he has once again stressed the importance of financial sector contributing to the world economy, and he has also stressed once again that we need to attract quality financial institutions as well as long-term capital to support the economic growth. And today, we have gathered representatives from international financial organizations, leading financial institutions, and business representatives. We also have invited the former governor of central banks of China, Japan, and France to have a dialogue. We hope that we can promote all parties in all countries to share the opportunities for deepening international cooperation. And we also hope to release China's opening up and development signal to reaffirm our commitment of a further opening up. So this is not only a summary of the results we have witnessed in the past 3 days, and we believe this is also an invitation to the global financial community to know better about the financial development here in Beijing. Present with us today, we have the leaders from the relevant state ministries, commissions, Beijing City, Xicheng District, heads of international financial organizations, and friends from the press. All are welcome. Thank you for being with us. Now we have the keynote speech. The first speaker is the founder and co-chairman of Carly Group to deliver a keynote speech. Mr. David, now you have the floor.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak today, and thank you all for coming. And I'd like to thank the hosts for organizing this incredible conference. I've learned a great deal since I've been here, and no doubt all of you have learned from many of the other speakers a good deal of things about trade, improved economies, and things that we're going to talk about later today. Let me focus my remarks on one particular subject. Organized history, as we know it, is roughly 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 years old. So obviously humans have been around for 400,000 or so, but as we know organized history with writing, with civilization as we have come to know it, is 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years old. It wasn't readily apparent 4,000, 5,000, or 6,000 years ago that the world would come together in a way where today there are two large economic forces in the world, China and my own country, the United States. Now, obviously, there's other major forces, the EU, Japan, and so forth, but the two most dominant economic powers, geopolitical powers, military powers, technological powers in the world are two countries, China and the United States. Now, that probably wasn't apparent to everybody 100 years ago that would be the case, or 200 years ago, or 300 years ago. But what we've now learned is that when countries come to the forefront and they become gigantic economic powers, the best way to continue to be a strong economic force is to cooperate with other countries in other parts of the world. Trade is the best way, perhaps the easiest way for countries to cooperate. Because while there will inevitably be tensions between some countries, there's always an opportunity to come together through economic cooperation. Now, clearly, we all know that sometimes there are tensions and there are ways that block economic cooperation. But it is our responsibility as individuals who have some ability to affect economic cooperation and trade to do things that make economic cooperation and trade go forward. Why is that important? What we've learned through thousands of years of history is that when people cooperate, different civilizations, different economies cooperate, and they trade with each other, there is greater prosperity for the citizens of each of those countries. And therefore, what life is all about is creating happiness. In my own country, the most famous words in English language were written by Thomas Jefferson. And he said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." But he never defined in the ensuing 50 years of his life what happiness is and how you achieve it. So others of us have had to figure out what produces happiness. And of course, it's very elusive. Everybody wants to be happy, but nobody knows perfectly how to achieve it. But one way towards achieving happiness is by having nations cooperate, particularly in the economic and trade areas. That is something that is possible to do. Now, we all stand in the docket of history. We stand in the docket of history. Will we together say we don't want to cooperate because we'd rather produce happiness by ourselves, or we would rather cooperate because we recognize we can create greater happiness if we cooperate? And so I hope that the United States and China and other major economic forces in the world will recognize that while there are always going to be some challenges, some tensions, we should not let those get in our way. We stand in a place today where we have a challenge. The challenge for us is, are we going to meet the opportunities that are available to us? Are we going to take the challenge of greater economic cooperation and greater economic capabilities and produce greater happiness, or are we going to stand aside and say, no, we don't want to pursue that? Obviously, there are many ways we can prevent happiness from occurring and prevent us from cooperating, but I think we've made progress in recent years. And I think now, in even the past year, we've made progress. And I do think that while there have been some challenges and some difficulties at times, those are inevitable. All human relationships have some challenges. If you are married, you have a spouse, if you have a child, you have cousins, you have other relatives, you always know whenever two or more humans get together, there's always some challenges. So when you have hundreds and hundreds of millions of humans trying to work together, there's always going to be challenges. But we should not ignore those challenges by saying we can't fix those challenges. We should, as I say, move forward and begin to cooperate. And I've seen signs recently from greater cooperation occurring between the United States and China, for example, and I think that will continue. And so I'm very optimistic that as we go forward, the greater happiness that can be achieved by greater economic cooperation is within our grasp. So we should not stand back and say, let this challenge go forward and we don't want to tackle it. We should be welcoming this challenge and say it is our responsibility as citizens of this planet to move forward and achieve greater economic cooperation to produce greater happiness. Now, let me just end with one final comment, something I addressed yesterday. In my country, some of the great happiness is achieved when we have a particular relationship with China, and that is when China provides some panda bears to my country. Panda bears are a great symbol of China, of course, but they're a great symbol of U.S.-China cooperation. As the chairman of the Smithsonian, which owns the National Zoo, I was involved in helping to make certain that the pandas stayed in the United States. Now, we've recently, 2 days ago, the pandas have returned to China, which is what they should have done. They're due to come back to China. But my hope is that we can make a symbol of the cooperation between the States and China and a symbol of greater economic cooperation among all the major countries in the world by having more pandas in the United States at some foreseeable future. And so I hope that any of you come to visit me in the United States at some point in the future will be able to come with me to the National Zoo and see some wonderful pandas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. David Rubinstein, for a wonderful speech. Our next speaker is Madam Manuela V. Ferro, Vice President of the World Bank, East Asia and Pacific. She's going to deliver a video speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to join you today for the closing ceremony of the 2023 Financial Street Forum. I want to thank the hosts for this invitation, namely the Beijing Municipality, the People's Bank of China, the National Financial Regulatory Administration, China's Securities Regulatory Commission, Xinhua News, and the State Administration of Foreign Exchange for organizing this very good opportunity to exchange perspectives on the state of the financial sector and also of the global economy. This year's forum comes at a time when the global economy is still straining under the weight of the pandemic's after effects. There is a recovery underway, but it's being affected by the unwinding of COVID policy support, by rising protectionism, and by the global ripples of expanding conflicts. These concerns are aggravated by long-term challenges to growth. We see a sustained decline in productivity growth, which is felt across developing countries over the past 2 decades, and East Asia has not been immune to this productivity growth slowdown. We also see declining population growth, nowhere faster in East Asia, and this risks the region growing old before it grows rich. And lastly, the impacts of accelerating climate change, which are already felt in the region. And in China, we estimate by the end of the decade, the poorest 40% of the population could suffer climate change-related income losses of nearly 5%. For all these reasons, we estimate that the global economy will grow by only 2.1% this year and little more in 2024. Now, over the next decade, potential growth in emerging markets and developing economies is projected to be 1 percentage point below last decade's average. With each lost percentage point of growth, 100 million people will remain trapped in poverty and another 50 million in extreme poverty. Now, even in developing East Asia, which has been the engine of the world's growth over the past few decades, and where economic growth continues to outperform that of most regions, we expect growth to level off this year and the next. This is therefore a much more difficult context than we've had in the past 2 decades, and it is in this context that China is engineering its own economic recovery. In addition to lower export demand on the domestic front, China is dealing with the need to shift away from a growth strategy reliant on physical investments with a high carbon footprint into a more sustainable growth path. And it is also dealing with corporate debt overhangs and while managing the impacts of a rapid population aging and climate change. We at the bank are forecasting China's GDP growth at 5.1% in 2023, and following the reopening of COVID and before decelerating afterwards next calendar year. But this, of course, will depend on what policy measures and policy signals the Chinese authorities will design and implement. Now, at the global level, to revive growth, we will need to address the fundamental global challenges, and financial cooperation, which I know is the theme of today's meeting, will be critical. The World Bank makes an important contribution to global financial cooperation. We provide financing and expertise to global developing countries, as much as $73 billion US dollars in financing in fiscal year 23, of which 40% was for climate action. While this is an important contribution to global financial cooperation, we are keenly aware that it is only a small part of total development assistance. OECD economies provided some $200 billion in assistance in 2022, and this is dwarfed by other cross-border financing flows, such as remittances, which amounted to $656 billion US dollars in 2023, or foreign direct investment, which has reached over 1.2 trillion US dollars in 2022. Now, to achieve our vision of a world free of poverty on a livable planet, financial cooperation in a much broader sense is needed. It is needed to maintain macroeconomic stability, to enable capital to flow where it is most needed, and to create incentives for governments and for private investors to mobilize sufficient funds for social goods. I want to focus the rest of my remarks on three main points. The first is the need for a global financial system that is fit for purpose, that is stable and serving the needs of the real economy. Second is the importance of mobilizing more private capital for global development challenges. And third is for improving cooperation of multilateral development institutions. Our global financial system must remain fit for purpose. It needs to serve the needs of the real economy, and to do so safely, and mechanisms to deal with excessive debt. The global financial system has come a long way since the financial crisis of 2008 and 2010. Prudential regulations and oversight have been strengthened, and this is a very strong outcome of what was a very difficult crisis. Banks and other financial intermediaries have become better capitalized and more resilient to shocks. Now, in 2022, total capital adequacy ratios of 81 largest global banks was over 17%, double of what it was prior to the 2011 period when the Basel framework reform started. Now, in China, the total bank capital adequacy ratio has grown from around 8.5% prior to the 2008 financial crisis to over 15%. Are evolving, and we believe that more measures actually need to be taken. The past decade of unorthodox monetary policies and the abundance of low-cost financing has led to large-scale, easy borrowing by governments, by corporates, and by households, all alike, and historically high global debt levels. Interest payments hamper growth and eat into development expenditures. Today, almost two-thirds of countries that receive support from the International Development Association, which is the world countries, are either in debt distress or in high risk of debt distress. We provide as grants so that we are part of the solution, not part of the problem. Concerns of corporate debt failures and big increases in public debt servicing that will restrict what countries can spend on growth-enhancing investments. I also wanted to mention that the failures of Credit Suisse in Switzerland, of regional banks in the US, and recently property developer defaults in China are all examples of previously less visible risks being brought into the spotlight. There is significant progress on that restructuring and the landmark agreement of official bilateral creditors with Zambia and the acceleration of debt discussions in Ghana and in Sri Lanka. The Global Sovereign Roundtable made important proposals to improve the process of debt restructuring. The level of financial intermediaries, capital adequacy, liquidity, and good governance will remain the fundamental tenets of sound finance. Regulators globally should focus on completing the implementation of Basel III principles and further strengthening standards for financial safety. Finally, as the digitalization of financial services continues, global cooperation to establish effective supervision and best practice standards of these new technologies will be also critical. These are only a few examples, but they illustrate the importance of global cooperation to maintain a functional financial system that remains fit for purpose. Maintaining a stable global financial system is a precondition for reviving growth, but it will not be enough. To accelerate long-term development, we must deal with the fundamental challenges to growth. And these include climate change, as I mentioned, human capital gaps, shortfalls in basic services such as water and sanitation, and managing collective risks such as pandemics. The public sector and development banks alone cannot finance sustainable development. We need to find ways to mobilize more private capital to address shared global challenges. And let's take climate as an example. Investment needs for the climate change action are enormous. As the largest multilateral provider of climate finance to developing countries, the World Bank has invested over $30 billion globally in climate projects last year. But I note this is still not enough. For example, we estimate that China alone will need to invest an additional $14 trillion US from now until 2060, just in the power and transport sectors alone to meet its own NDC targets. Our World Bank President Ajay Banga has pledged to raise the World Bank's own global climate financing, and we need to mobilize the private sector to help us. Now, to attract more private capital, we need to create a framework that provides financial incentives for private climate investments. And the World Bank, for example, through guarantees to de-risk private investments or by mobilizing private capital through products such as the green and blue bonds we launched over the past years. However, international cooperation will be needed to create a more ambitious global framework for private climate investments that internalizes public costs, creates shared standards, and prevents regulatory arbitrage. To name a few examples, we need to institute green taxonomies, avoid inefficient protectionism of green tech, and harmonize approaches to carbon pricing and to emissions trading. Our research suggests that carbon tax coverage expanded significantly during the past decade and now covers close to a quarter of all greenhouse gas emissions. However, only 40 or so countries have adopted carbon price measures, and with the price differing dramatically between $1 to $140 per ton of CO2. The world needs to come together in a more uniform and serious way if we want to make a difference on global public challenges such as climate change, while there's still time, and time is running out. Lastly, I want to talk about what multilateral development banks can do to improve financial cooperation with each other. As I noted earlier, the MDBs, like the World Bank, are only a small part of global finance, but we have multilateralism in our DNA, and we should lead by example, and we are committed to doing so. Improving cooperation and partnerships has been a core objective of the World Bank's ongoing reform process under our new president, and these internal reforms involved stretching our own balance sheet to expand our financial capacity by up to $150 billion over the next decade, while preserving our AAA rating. And we have led to concrete steps to strengthen our cooperation with other multilateral development banks. And we have several in this region that we work closely with. Most notably, at our just concluded annual meetings in Marrakesh, we announced a new collaboration agreement with 9 MDBs, including the AIB, the NDB, and the ADB in the East Asia and Pacific regions. Now, concrete improvements will range from harmonizing and standardizing our processes, including on procurement, to facilitate co-financing and developing joint mechanisms to mobilize private capital. The World Bank is very committed to raise the volume of development finance from both our own balance sheet, but also, as I mentioned, mobilizing private capital. Now, the practical implementations of the MDB agreement is going to be critical now to convince all stakeholders of the seriousness of these efforts. And from our side, I can already say that the AIB is the largest co-financier of the World Bank around the world. In closing, let me just conclude in the spirit of hope and optimism. Working together, I believe we can rein in climate change, we can reinvigorate growth and create jobs while safeguarding a livable planet. And the financial sector, which you all participate in, public and private, will play a key role in this. And I would like to thank the organizers again for the effort of bringing us all together to discuss these issues of critical importance and really of shared importance. I wish you a very successful conclusion of the forum. And I look forward to reading about the actionable steps that will be taken to follow up these ideas during the past 3 days. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Madam. Thank you for your speech. We can see that almost all the speakers have attached a great importance to how financial sector contribute to the economic reinvigoration. Next, I give the floor to Mr. Liang Youshi and the Mayor of the City of London. Now you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alderman Nicholas Lyons, the 694th Lord Mayor of London. I'm sorry I'm not able to be with you in person today, but I'm pleased to be able to address the Financial Street Forum virtually from the mayoral residence, Mansion House, which sits at the heart of the City of London, the UK's ancient cultural and commercial hub. Pleased particularly because the topic of this session, strengthening financial cooperation towards a promising future, aligns so well with my mayoral theme for the year, financing our future. The post of Lord Mayor of London is one of the oldest continuously elected civic offices, first occupied back in 1189. And when you're watching this, it will sadly be my final day in office as I hand over the baton to the new Lord Mayor, Michael Mainelli. China is a crucial partner for the City of London, and most major Chinese financial institutions now have offices in the Square Mile. Indeed, the Bank of China has had a base here for over 90 years. So I was thrilled to have the opportunity to visit China not once but twice during my mayoralty. And during my trips, the first by a Lord Mayor for 5 years, I had meetings with Vice President Han Zheng and with key Chinese regulators and businesses. And I was really encouraged by their open and positive attitudes towards foreign investment and investors, and their determination to engage on big issues of global consequence, especially sustainability. At the City of London Corporation, we are keenly aware of the importance of maintaining international partnerships. Indeed, it's net building over the course of centuries that has made the Square Mile what it is today. With an eye to the rapidly changing world in which we live, in September, we unveiled our new Vision for Economic Growth. It's a roadmap for financial and professional services. 2 of its main aims are to scale innovative approaches to sustainable finance and to create innovative networks across the world. So as China's financial services sector continues to open up, we're keen to work with stakeholders, particularly in the areas of green and sustainable finance and asset management. And we also want to strengthen the offshore RMB business here in London, which is the largest offshore trading centre for RMB. I'd like to use this opportunity to talk about just a couple of those key areas of collaboration. Firstly, sustainable finance. Climate change is the biggest threat to our future, and it's clear that there can be no solution to the climate crisis without the cooperation, indeed the leadership of China, including on green finance. Developing transition finance solutions will be key for China too in the years ahead. I'm pleased to say that London has established itself as a one-stop shop for green and sustainable finance, at the forefront of innovating and internationalizing green finance solutions that will help countries worldwide to meet their climate commitments, such as the development of high-integrity voluntary carbon markets, where the London Stock Exchange Group is leading the way. The UK-China Green Finance Task Force has been driving private sector input and green capital flows in both directions since it was set up in 2016, providing a vital platform for UK and Chinese financial services to exchange ideas and expertise in areas including ESG investing and TCFD disclosure. And I'd like to thank the co-chairs, Dr. Mao Jun, who joined us at the Mansion House for the Net Zero Delivery Summit in May, and my colleague Alderman Sir William Russell, and the British and Chinese companies who lead that task force. With COP28 in Dubai fast approaching, the pressure to meet our climate goals is intense. And our continued cooperation through forums like this will be so important as we move through these critical years to 2030. Asset management was another key focus during my visits to China. The UK is the largest centre for asset management outside the US, with over £10 trillion of assets under management. Nearly 50% of these assets are managed for overseas investors, and around a quarter of the world's cross-border IPO capital was raised in London last year. Our message to asset owners and managers is that London is perfectly positioned to be your international advisor and distributor, helping your overseas assets globalize, diversify, link to sustainability, and secure better returns. I've been promoting the UK's investment management offer via our Global Investment Futures campaign, alongside the Department for Business and Trade and the Investment Association. And if you're interested in hearing more, representatives from the City Corporation in Beijing would be keen to provide you with further information about this work. My friends, as China continues on a trajectory of impressive growth, the UK has so much to offer as the world's premier international financial global hub, supporting Chinese capital as it globalizes, diversifies, and embraces sustainable investing. By continuing to work together, we can help create a greener, fairer, more prosperous future for all. So thank you again for inviting me to speak today. Congratulations on another successful Financial Street Forum.
I thank you, Mr. Liang Youshi, for your speech. Next, I give the floor to Mr. Li Daokui, who is the Dean of the Chinese Economic Theory and Practice of Xinhua University. Now you have the floor. Your Excellencies, respected leaders, dear friends, it's such a pleasure to attend the 2023 Financial Street Forum, and I was told by the organizer that me and Professor Li Yang, we have attended the largest number of the forums ever since it was launched. And I'm very glad to see Mr. David Lubins, because he is not only a famous financialist, he is also an opinion leader. There are one-to-one interviews in the TV and he said that China need to send or to lend the pandas to America, and so as to restore and strengthen the China-U.S. relations. I would like to focus on one topic today. That's quite closely to the recently concluded Central Financial Work Conference. It's a think tank to build and strengthen China's bond market so as to diffuse the financial risks, and also to build China's into a major financial country. To build a financial major country is the very explicit objective raised at the recent Central Financial Work Conference. And how to build ourselves into a strong or a major financial country, we first need to diffuse the risks. The other one is that we need to, for the Chinese financial sector, you need to make contribution to the world finance. If you want to be a responsible major power, you definitely need to make your contribution. Then how to diffuse the risk and how to build ourselves into a major financial country while contributing to the world economy. And personally, I'm of the opinion that for our national bonds, we can strengthen it. And let me give you a series of statistics. Major countries, there are 3 levels of the national debt. 33 trillion US dollar by Japan, and this is the Japanese yen. If we translate it into the US dollar, it's 9 to 10 trillion US dollar. China, it's 3 to 4 trillion US dollar. This does not include just China, but also the UK, Italy, and Germany. Then the question for these national debt, what role does it play? They provide the most basic service. They price the asset. For example, whenever the interest of a US dollar changes, almost every asset that's priced by US dollar will be moderated. So this is the basic for the international finance. 25% of the national debt of the U.S. is held by the foreign investor. 9% of that in Japan, and 10 to 13% in China, and in some other European countries, it's around the same level. So we need to think about how the other countries can benefit from China's economic growth. I think the most feasible solution is that we expand our national debt, the market, to expand the market for the national debts, and also to attract the foreign investors to hold our national debt for the long term. So I think this is actually desirable by the foreign investors, because it's impossible for them to hold the national debts issued only by those few countries, because we need the buffer. And the central government of China, the financial asset volume we hold is definitely the number one, I think. And Dean, Mr. Li Yang, issued this report every year, and they are still issuing this report. So my conclusion is, and I think you will agree with me, and if you don't agree with me, you can correct me when you speak it. So our central government, we own the shareholders of the 4 big policy and commercial banks. We also own the shareholders of a big number of the SOEs. So we have a sizable an asset.
So the other countries are basically The other countries, they basically have nothing. So for the other governments, so they basically do not have financial assets. So internationally, they trust us. So if we issue treasury bond, I think it's going to be recognized by the international community, let alone that in the past 4 decades, we created a miracle. We didn't have systemic financial risks. So from every now and then, for international investors, we have some panic, of course, in the year of 2015, but we did not have a financial turmoil. For example, a decrease of 30% or 40% decrease of financial assets, and financial institutions go bankrupt. It never happened. So objectively speaking, foreign investors are willing to hold our treasury bond so that we can provide a hedge to international risks. Brazil, Saudi Arabia, these countries are hoping to use RMB for settlement because when they need to do investment in Hong Kong, etc. So treasury bond is actually the best way. So that was about the international logic. So when you issue RMB from 25 trillion to, let's say, 50 trillion, taking about 20% to our GDP. So according to the international standard, this is quite low. So what will it do to our domestic finance? There are a lot of benefits because currently a key risk for us is that the local risk is actually quite big. So we did some calculation. So of course it's not very accurate, about 80 trillion. So Mr. Liang, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So 80 trillion is a very big number. You just cannot rely on the local fiscal system to absorb this. So it can be difficult. I'll just use a cautious way to say it. It's something we need to deal with. We need to discuss a long-term mechanism to prevent the local debt from exploding. So I believe that through a certain kind of mechanism, we can let the central government hold it. That is a treasury bond. So it also helps us to do away with the financial risks at home. We can increase the amount of treasury bond we issue. It's going to be a great thing. So if our treasury increase from 20 to 40 to 50 billion, a lot is going to be held by international investors. They give us iron ores, we give them RMB, and they use RMB to buy our treasury bond. So it is a win-win mechanism. We do not force them to do that. We do not force the Brazilian companies to do this. So in summary, I think to implement the spirit in the central government's financial conference to build China into a strong nation in finance, a very important handle, something that we can do instantly, that is to strengthen and boost the scale of our treasury bond. This does not only provide Chinese services, but also it helps to do away with our risks. So correct me if I'm wrong. That's my speech. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Li Daokui, for your speech. A lot of very useful information. So we have a better understanding about what China can do instantly, and I'd like to thank you for your support. And next we have Mr. Li Yang, Chairman of the National Institute for Finance and Development and former Vice President of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here. I work together with Mr. Li Daokui to be part of this Financial Street Conference. So this conference is currently one of the best forum in China. So in such a forum, we need to do important things. So for the financial sector, the most important thing is now to build China into a strong nation in finance. This is a very big project. So with such an opportunity, I'd like to talk a little bit about this issue so that in the future we should spend a lot of effort to implement this. As we know that the central government actually has a lot of new wordings. One of it is to build China into a strong nation in finance. So we are already strong in economy, but in finance and culture and other aspects, we still need to catch up. So this is a quote from the Central Finance Conference. There are a lot of things, of course. I just picked a few quotes. So there are 5 layers. We have the target, the main support, priorities with such wordings. The first one is our target is to accelerate development to a strong nation in finance. So in the future, that is our target. So how do you define a country strong in finance? So for China, when compared with the other countries, so what is the difference and similarities between China and the rest of the nations? I think when we see this target, when we are striving for this target, we need to understand the nature of the goal. It's just like modernization we have this commonality for the globe and also China's characteristics. A nation strong in finance is the same. Of course, there are still global standard, but also China's characteristics. I think China's characteristics is very specific. It's led by the party, and it's people-oriented and party-oriented. There's no problem about that. And about the commonality, we have like 8 items. For example, the scale of the financial market and the financial institutions, total amount of wealth, and the international investment positions, the international status of currencies, and influence for international financial system and the financial infrastructures. So the laboratory I am actually did a project a few years ago, which is a prioritized project, which was to compare the United States. I'd like to talk a little bit about the result of that research. First, about China. So politics. So this is actually very clear to strengthen the leadership of the party, and in the Financial Work Conference, we have the Central Government Financial Work Committee. So this guarantees that the party will have an inside-out, up to top to bottom leadership. So there's no problem about that. And we have a series of requirements we need to implement. And secondly, people-oriented. So I don't know if you heard about this, but when we were at school, our teacher said, you're studying something that's for the rich. Now it's different. We need to serve the people, so it's a challenge. So in our laboratory, we have a project about people-oriented. So basically, we have 4 things that's important. First, we should serve the real economy. And there are 2 things. First is that we should lessen financial depression. So it is fair to say that at the very beginning we have financial depression, but gradually we have less, but still we have it. And next one is excessive finance. So in China we have both. We have depression and we have excessive development. So those are the things we need to guard against. And secondly, we need to facilitate the healthy development of the real estate market. Especially, we need to guarantee housing. We cannot make it a total commercial thing. Those who have money will have better living conditions. Those who do not will have to live in poor conditions. It is a rights of everybody. So everybody should have a place to live in. It is fundamental rights of the people. And certainly, there's still a large population of farmers. As you know, that the farmer issue is critical to China, but still, it is a problem. We are doing some researches. We found that the farmer issues, it is something we inherited historically, and it's from the Soviet Union. So the way the Soviet Union dealt with farmers actually misled us. So we need to guarantee the rights to land and asset, to decrease the difference between the urban and rural areas. So if we can do away with the difference, we can do away with about the 40% of the issues we have.
And also, we have observed that in the recent few years for the small and micro businesses, and we have some very well-learned in the news. I think we need to understand the Chinese economy in two dimensions. And we have the institutional advantage, that is both the politics and the people-centered and the consideration. Then let's take a look at this common analysis. And Professor Dao Kui has mentioned a lot as a power, as a major country. And let's find another major country to compare. And let's see where we are. And let's see what we are strong at and what we are weak at and what we can improve. There are 8 aspects. For a power, for a major country, it needs to be both a hard strength and a soft strength. Hard means the wealth, market, technology, and international investment position, as well as its mechanisms. But there are also soft strengths, like, for example, its infrastructure and its influence or impact on the international financial sector. First, the size. China's financial sector is much smaller than that of the U.S. Now we are 60% of the U.S. So this is already a big achievement. So this is a sign that we have the Chinese financial sector has grown a lot. In terms of the structure, bank is playing a leading role. So we concentrate our resources to get one achievement done. But now what we face is we not only need to do big things, we also need to do some very risky things, also need to do not big, but that's important things, and also some unprecedented things, for example, insurance. And this, the Central Financial Work Conference, as mentioned, the pension finance. We need a finance to support the pension, to support the old age care. We talked about the popular finance, the creative finance, the innovative finance. For the banking system, it's risk averted. So we do not have much strength to lead the innovation. At the Central Financial Work Conference, the innovative finance has taken 2 chapters. So looking forward, we need to build a major finance country to strengthen our weak links. The other point is for our financial sector, no matter it's the direct financing or indirect financing, we have a very big cost for the intermediary or the agency. So there is another conclusion that is from the Central Financial Work Conference, that is to reduce the financing cost. So this is a very sharp-eyed comments. We talked about we have contributed a lot to the GDP, but on the other hand, the financial services, it is the service provider. If you have contributed a lot to our national GDP, it means those contributed by the real economy and by those benefits enjoyed by the small and medium-sized enterprises and will be slower. High interest rate was due to historical reasons, as Governor Peng has also mentioned the day before yesterday, and China is ready to further lower its interest rate. For the financial market, we have an idea that there is a debt market or a bond market, and the bond market is a part of the debt market. The debt market here in China is the loan and the bonds. We are the second in the world. That's very high. This is another sign of our financial power. But the problem is that our bonds is only a small portion compared with the loans. So what's in the finance? And the national treasury is a very small share of it. So when you open the door, you need to build yourself into a major financial country. If you want other countries want you to work with you, they want a safe asset. They want sovereign asset. They want the assurance. But we have a few of them. And we have some inherited issues and problems. And we have the market is segregated and fragmented. So this is a very traditional issue. For the stock market, I will not spend much time on it. I believe you know better than the other interest market. It's the same. So at the Central Financial Work Conference, they talked the real things. They said they need to encourage the long-term capital to be invested here in China, and also to raise the long-term capital. Although you can get a loan from the bank, but there won't be a high proportion. And sometimes we see that the banks do not have enough reserve, and if they loan much of their asset, and they will not have the sufficient reserved cash. So looking forward, we need to ensure a steady development in this regard. Third, and wealth. I thank Dao Kui because he also closely following our national report on the national strength. Let me tell you, China has the largest amount of wealth, or the Chinese government has the largest amount of wealth. The U.S. government owns negative 1.7% of its national wealth, and so the government has no money. They borrow a lot of money, and the UK is also the same case. They possess minus 1.7% of the national wealth. In Japan and Singapore, it's not negative, but just 2 to 3%. But here, the Chinese government owns 15% of the national wealth. So that is the Chinese characteristics. And the Chinese government owns a higher share of a country's net wealth compared with all other countries in the world. So we have a better capability and a better resilience and a better risk resistance for the financial sector development. In terms of the finance tech, fintech, and China is one of the 3 big powers in the world, but we also encounter some challenges, and we see some corrective actions, and we will continue to catch up. Comparatively speaking, and almost all new technology is in U.S., and they also have a established legal framework and legal infrastructure. UK is a small country. Though the office, I visited the office several times. Although it is a small country, but it's a very influential in the financial impact. But it's good at the privacy protection as well as the IPR protection. And they have an innovative the macro policy system. And as Governor Pan has mentioned, the PBOC has a macro discretion. So though they may not be the one to implement it, but UK is one of the central banks that has mentioned this, and the others may just vibrate between those two extremes. So the digital economy is also the strength of the UK. China, we have a super big, super huge market, as well as all the platforms to attract the flows. And we believe that for the technology, and we also need to improve our regulation. So investment positions. We know that sometimes we say there is a bit here, there is a bit there, and when you put them together, and they still not very many or very much. Many of the risks can be diffused. And for China, our out of bonds investment position is leading the world. It's big in size, but our biggest problem is many of them do not have a high return. My colleague, Professor Yu, is complaining about this. We have a higher share of the debt, but we have a lower return on our investment. But for example, the U.S., that's in strong contrast with the U.S. They use their cheap U.S. dollar to buy the assets, the fastest growing national assets. So it is the biggest debtor, but it's also the biggest beneficiary. So this is something we need to be aware of. So we need to optimize our overseas investment structure and also to improve the return. Sixth, the international status of a currency. There are 4 yardsticks in judging the international standing of a currency. One is foreign exchange. If countries all choose a currency for their settlement, and last but not least, the central banks of countries around the world, which is the biggest share of foreign currency they have in reserve. The RMB is still in a smaller share, but we have realized that in the recent few years, especially after the subprime crisis, in these all 4 respects, China is degrading, but China is growing fast. But probably because we start late, and although we are growing fast, but we are still lagging behind. But we are very optimistic of the growth potential. 7th is the financial infrastructure. This is the so-called soft power. The financial infrastructure includes more than what we used to know. For example, the payment system. In China, only in the recent decade, we came to realize the importance of a payment system. In the textbooks, there are 5 functions of a finance, and you do not have to have all the other 4 functions, but the payment function is the most indispensable one for currency. Because, for example, for America, by the payment function, they can have some long arm jurisdiction, and they also the legal environment is also complicated. We have the very legal systems, and they treat the issues in different ways, so they may have some discrete impact. And the third one is corporate governance. For example, the accounting rules. Some say there are European accounting rules and American accounting rules. So we are actually here in China, we are hesitating about which one to use. But now we are thinking, we began to think about, do we need to have a Chinese one? Yes, when evaluation system is talked about, we do have to have such an accounting system. And the other one is the credit environment, anti-money laundering, and the financial regulation. So they covers a lot. So if you compare the notes, you can find out we are not doing very well at all in this regard. It is the impact on the international financial system. We listen to the World Bank speech, and we know our IMF. So needless to say, we do not have a commendable say in the international financial organizations. We, as a national high-end think tank, and we tell them we need to speak the Chinese language. We need to tell the Chinese story so that they know the real China. So, and China has been distorted, has actually been misunderstood a lot. But we do not seem to have the channel to clear those doubts. The other one is and sometimes we face the request that they need to see the accounting books, the account books. For the infrastructure, for example, the SWIFT, they also may interfere with the function of a financial system. No matter the petroleum or the other commodities, who owns the pricing right? And definitely, no matter who, but definitely not China, and we do not have much say in the pricing. So all in all, we need to improve our financial influence in the world community. We have just held the 10th anniversary summit of the Belt and the Road Initiative. There may be some questions of why do we need to have the Belt and the Road Initiative. So after knowing this, you may know that although we have a low term, but we are making the efforts. So it is a necessary path and a journey for us to grow to be a financial major power. We need a place to make our own voice, and we need a place to make our voice heard by countries. So this for the international organizations where China is a member, we need to step forward to make our voice so as to increase our influence. So in summary, the recently concluded Central Financial World Conference, it is a great event. It is of a great relevance. And us, as a national think tank, we did some comparison and also share with you. We hope it can be beneficial and useful to you. Thank you. I thank you, and thank you for this sharing. It's a very professional. but also a straightforward sharing. And we indeed benefit a lot. And I thank all the keynote speakers, and I thank you for your contribution to the Financial Street Forum. Dear friends, the Financial Street Forum was created in year 2012 and upgraded to a national international professional forum since 2022. In the past 12 years, the Financial Street Forum has given full play to the role of China's financial reform and development barometer. It has witnessed the reform and development process of China's financial industry and has reached a number of important achievements. In the early stage, the organizing committee carried out extensive project collection from policy norms, initiative conventions, research reports, index release. Now we have selected the top 10 achievements. Now I'm going to present to you outcome 1. We are going to reach a memorandum of understanding on deepening supervision cooperation on financial science and technology innovation in Dawan District, Guangdong, Hong Kong, and Macau. And outcome 2, it means realizing the networking and adopting of the regulatory requirements of the financial science and technology innovation supervision tools of the People's Bank of China, the financial science and technology supervision of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, and the innovative financial science and technology pilot project of the Macau Monetary Authority. The outcome 2 from this year's Financial Street Forum is a financial digitization capability maturity guidelines. The outcome 3 is the information disclosure guide for financial applications of artificial intelligence algorithms. It aims to safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of financial consumers. Outcome 4 is a guiding opinions on strengthening standardization of securities and futures industry. It is the first important problem document to make comprehensive arrangements for the standardization development of security and the futures industry, and guide the long-term developments of capital market standardization. Outcome 5. It is Beijing initiative to discuss and share development opportunities of globalization. They closely follow the theme of the 2023 Financial Street Forum annual meeting. Outcome 6. We reached a convention on the ethical self-regulation of financial science and technology. A guide licensed financial institutions, science and technology companies, and other member units to actively participate in the application of financial science and technology innovation. Outcome 7. It is the bank electronic voucher interconnection platform. We build an intensive, shared, collaborative, and efficient digital financial trusted public service infrastructure and realize the system single point one-stop access. Achievement A, we have come up with a list of the Chinese financial science and technology unicorns. With a standardized and rigorous selection mechanism, 60 most competitive financial science and technology unicorns were selected from more than 1,000 financial science and technology enterprises. Outcome 9, we issued the China Financial New Development Index 2023, in-depth implementation of the 5 new development concepts of innovation coordination and the green and sharing scientific measurement of the construction of new development patterns in financial cooperation. Outcome 10, research on overseas Chinese financial development. It is the first systematic and comprehensive study on overseas Chinese finance at home and abroad to analyze the theoretical logic of overseas Chinese financial development. Dear distinguished guests, friends both offline and online, we felt it's a great honor to be able to witness the great achievements in the construction and the development of the financial sector. And thank you for following the Financial Street Forum. And now we are taking a 10-minute coffee break. And after that, we will have a summit. We will have a high-end discussion. And with us today, and we have Mr. Zhou Xiaochuan, the former governor of PBOC, and the former governor of French Central Bank, and the former governor of the Japanese Central Bank. And next session will be moderated moderated by Madam Yang Yanqing, the economic professor of Fudan University.
Distinguished guests, the conference is about to begin. Please take your seat. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here, and I'm the host of our discussion. So in this discussion, we have very, very important central bankers. You're very familiar with them. Also, on my left hand, we have Mr. Zhou Xiaochun, Vice Chairman to the Board Forum for Asia and the Chief Representative to China. We know that he actually has been responsible for in this role for a long time. So that was when China elevated its position financially. And you know that Mr. Zhou was a policymaker and promoted the whole process. So to his left, you have Mr. Masaki Shirakawa, distinguished guest professor, Aoyama Kukin University, former Bank of Japan governor, BOJ. And you know that in 2008 and 2013 was the most difficult time for BOJ. So we define it as turbulent times. So we will discuss it. How did you went through that time? So in addition to our bankers from Japan and China online, we have Christian Neuer, Director of BNP Paribas, former Governor of the Banque de France. So he served the role in 2003 and 2015. As we know that it was the European euro crisis, the most difficult time for the euro. So we have three very important guests here to talk about, to do this discussion. So I think our discussion will be surrounding the central banks. So if we look at the history, we've been through the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009, and then the pandemic. So after the pandemic, we experienced the most important inflation. So for central banks, you did not expect the financial crisis in 2008, and then you did not expect the inflation. So in the past 10 years or so, there are a lot of things to discuss, actually. So I think there are two ideas. One is a mandate of central banks. The other thing is a paradigm, the mission and the paradigm. So I think we will invite our guests from Japan and France to talk about the global agendas. But before that, let's talk about the mandate and paradigm of central banks and do some fundamental discussions. So my first question is for Mr. Zhou. So from the perspective of the paradigm and also from the perspective of our toolbox, as well as the policies we can take, there are actually three important pillars. The first is how can we take targeted measures? So that is a first thing. And secondly, because in the past we speak a lot about expectation, and Mr. Shiragawa also has been a promoter of such expectations. So how do we carry out work on regard that? And the third one is of central banks' policies. How do we choose the timing? Is it more timely the better, the earlier the better? So yeah, that's the three pillar. So Mr. Zhou, so what's your take on these questions? Thank you. So it is a pleasure to be gathered here with Mr. Shiragawa and Mr. Neuer to be part of our Financial Street Conference. I am very much willing to be part of this forum because there are many problems to study. But generally, I wouldn't directly talk about policymaking in the central banks because it's difficult for everybody to work in this industry already. And for macro policies, there are a lot of different opinions and critics. And I have really a lot of sympathy for them. So actually, there are many questions and agendas worth discussing, and we can improve and do better in the future. So I do not want to touch upon two specific issues. So for your questions, I'd like to talk about from the perspective of methodology. So actually, in terms of macro policy system, sometimes the economy will have all kinds of fluctuations and problems, so you need to regulate them to bring them back on track. So Mr. Shiragawa is actually an expert in this regard because I always hear him that he have enjoyed in discussions. So first you need to know the problems of Japan. The problem was long-term low growth. Only when you locate the problem, will you be able to take actions. So for our economic system, as a system, it has all kinds of indicators. It's just like when you are checking your body, checking your health, there are all kinds of indicators. Some are right, some are not right. So you just do not have a single drug to change a single metrics. But rather, you need to figure out the diseases behind those abnormal indexes. And also, before you have abnormal indexes, did you have any like life habit issues? You smoke or drink or any other reasons? So you need to change the old habit. So those are necessary. So for the Chinese economy, I think we are talking about how to do anti-cyclic regulation. So you need to judge. You need to judge for your economic system if it is abnormal or there's fluctuation. Is it cyclic or not? For sometimes it is cycle issue. Sometimes it is not. And for this system, sometimes it has external influence, and so you need to determine the nature of it, because your system may lose effect. It's just like when you're driving. For example, there's something wrong with the brakes or wheels. You better stop and check the problem instead of put your foot on the gasoline and not stop. So for the system, your system can probably have problem, and the loop can be problematic. And we have a few situations. First, we have cyclic fluctuations, similar to what you see in the mass. It goes up and down, and when it reaches the bottom, it will rise again. And in the next cycle, it's going to rise again. So this is, for example, problems like insufficiency of supply, and then invest, and then you have a surplus of productivity, and then you get into the next cycle. But this system, there's something else in this system. For example, the pandemic. The pandemic is a shock. We said it in 2003, the SARS pneumonia disappeared in 3 months' time. But this time it's another pandemic, but the peak is quite wide. It's not months instead of it's 3 years. But still, it is a shock. And for some, there you have this step-like change. So you can see a step-by-step change. Maybe the step is not so inclined, but when you get up, you just can't get back. For example, aging. So aging is a problem that's like a stage. So before, we didn't know about climate change and greenhouse effect, but when you have it, it is already there, and you can never go down. So what I'm trying to say is in the changes, and we saw these are not cyclic. So if you use cyclic regulation measures to deal with it, it's not that you can't, but most probably it's not going to work. So I think that's the determination of the problem. We need to have more study, more discussion, and have more improve on the determination of the issues. So that's for one. And again, there's something that's relevant. I think with Noer and Mr. Shiragawa, we experienced that's the global financial crisis. In 2008, when it occurred, everybody was wondering why did it happen, and why the Lehman Brothers caused such a big problem, as if you're just going down a slide that you cannot stop. So there was one opinion. It's my view. That is, there's something wrong with the feedback system. There's too many positive feedback For example, the higher the value, the easier to get financing. The higher the rating, the easier to issue bonds, and the easier to get money. So that's a positive feedback. So the market was having a lot of rise and fall. So we need to decrease the positive feedback and give them more negative feedback so the system will stabilize. The international BIS did something. Some people are not familiar with this word, so they say. So this is anti-cyclic or cyclic. So I forgot that wording. Procyclicality, counter-cyclicality, or pro-cyclicality. That it was a long name. So for these words, it stresses cycle, but for some problems, it's not cycle. So they are just intertwined. And the further we go, how do we report that to the G20 summit in 2009? What are the regulation measures should we take? So at that time, BIS said we had a word. Maybe we can borrow that word. It was microprudent. Prudential. So macroprudential, people have different views. Is it about regulation or policy framework? So there was a dispute as well. So because G20 passed it, domestically, we are also doing such work to summarize the lessons of the financial crisis. We used macroprudential. But actually, after our observation for so many years, macroprudential is not actually working well. So a lot of colleagues in the financial sector, including micro regulation and economics, many people do not have a clear idea about it. They don't know exactly what is macroprudential, and people have totally different views. Sometimes it's like covering a lot of things. But the root is cyclicality. As a result, I want to say the macro regulation of monetary policy is quite complicated. You need to take the right measures for the right problem. And for the diagnosis, it has to be clear. And at the same time, with the financial sector and the general public, you need to have quality communication. And only when you do that, regulation will work better. So, of course, I'm talking about the past, but it is very much related to what we have today. I think I say too much. Okay, I'll stop here. And I forgot the rest of your questions. We can talk about it later. Thank you so much for your illustration, because we talked about cycle issues and structural issues, step-shaped or other shaped, and also he talked about the idea of a microprudential policy framework, and it is still very inspiring for today.
Have a talk about how to diagnose the disease of the macroeconomy and how to how to have a good prescription for the symptoms for the macro system. And also we have talked about the history of the Japan, and also what kind of diseases, Governor, in your view, that we can learn from Japan's experiences, and for China, maybe we can learn a lot from that experiences. And also at the same time, if you look at today of the Japan's kind of dilemma of the monetary policy, actually, BOJ has indicated the end and exit of the YCC, but it's very, very difficult. So against backdrop of the history, and also look at today's dilemma, what is your takeaway about the disease, and also what is prescription for the Japan, and also broadly for the whole world? Governor, very difficult questions. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to this conference. And I'm very glad to be a part of this conference together with my former colleague, Governor Zhou and Governor Noailles. And you raise very difficult questions. And as you know, the growth rate of the Japanese economy declined gradually in the past 30 years. And in my view, fundamentally, there are three causes for declining growth rate. One is direct consequence of bursting of bubble. And the second is the demographic change, especially declining working age population. And the third is the inflexibility of Japanese the social practice in response to globalization and technology change. I'd like to explain a bit about all these causes. One is a bubble. In late 1980s, we experienced huge bubbles. And in those days, the Bank of Japan wanted to raise interest rate, but we were so minority. And many economists are against raising interest rate, just because there's no sign of inflation. So why, in those days, those economists said, why do you want to raise interest rate? But in retrospect, prolonged monetary easing was one of the causes of the huge bubble. And eventually, bursting of bubble produce decline in economic activity. So one thing we have to remember is that even though inflation rate is subdued, sometimes we have to implement monetary tightening. And the second factor is the demographic change. I'm always referring to this fact. The Japan's growth rate is low among G7 countries, but if we adjust for change in working age population, then picture is quite different. The growth rate in the past 20 years or so, in terms of GDP per working age population, is the highest for Japan. And you may don't think so, but you can easily check this fact. So one of the fundamental causes of low growth of Japan is declining working age population. The third is Japan's social practice. Case in point is lifetime employment system. Still, many firms are adopting lifetime employment system. So even though the some product of the company is gaining less popularity, the companies have to employ those workers. So to that extent, the adjustment of labor mobilization is delayed. And this is translated into lower productivity growth. So all these are fundamental cause of low growth of Japanese economy. Then the question is how we should conduct monetary policy in this kind of environment. And in this regard, of course, inflation development is one of the important the information, but this is not so the data we should look. And we have to look at the financial imbalances in a broad sense. For instance, leverage, maturity, the transformation, etc. And but nonetheless, people tend to look at low growth due to the demographic change as cyclical weakness. And if that kind of thinking prevails, then monetary policy, the monetary easing will be the prolonged. And but this is not good. You raised a question about the yield curve control or monetary policy in Japan, and my reading of Bank of Japan monetary policy is they are gradually changing monetary policy. Of course, as you say, this is very challenging task, but still, it seems they are heading for changing in monetary policy, and that is very much needed. I will stop here.
If I may ask you a question.
Of course.
Yeah, because Chinese people worry very much whether China may follow the Japanese ways to have a last decade.
Yeah.
One of the discussion is many of Chinese economists read the Richard Ku's book talking about balance sheet recession. You mentioned three reasons of Japanese economy. Do you think the balance sheet recession is a good or correct argument or not?
Okay. I know Richard Ku quite well, and I basically agree with his analysis of the importance of balance sheet adjustment. That actually, when I was working at the Bank of Japan in early 1990s, I was proposing that kind of argument. But in those days, this argument was not popular. So one of the reasons why Japan was delayed in coping with non-performing loan problem was people did not understand the importance of balance sheet adjustment. So at least in the case of Japan, his argument was quite right. But your question is whether or not this analysis of Japanese economies applies to China's economy today. And in this case, it depends on several factors. One factor is how serious the Chinese bubble is, and how quickly Chinese authority will cope with possible bursting of bubble. And in this respect, I do not have clear answer. But one of the things is a foreign. Anyway, if once bubble is created, then the consequence of bursting of bubble itself is inevitable. But the crucial factor is how quickly government will take necessary actions. And in the case of Japan, the action was delayed because for two reasons. One is people could not understand what is the eventual consequence of bubble bursting. And they tend to think that this is just about the problem of financial institutions which made profit in bubble time. So they do not support, for instance, injection of public money into banks. But actually, the injection of public money was needed. And to the extent that Japanese government was delayed, then the consequence for the economy was so serious. So in this respect, it is crucially important that the economists and policy authorities will make good analysis of the eventual outcome. And in this respect, I do not have strong view about that. And also, the politicians need courage to do right thing, even though those measures are unpopular among public.
Thank you, Governor Shirakawa and also Governor Zhou 两位行长的这个对话哈，展示了我们。
Thank you, the governors, and thank you for your talk. This talk is of great relevance, and we also understand this talk is sometimes actions need to be made, and although it's not unpopular.
Nova year.
And so we go back to the question. Governor Zhou has had no time to elaborate. First, timing. Which is the perfect timing? The earlier, the better, or as a the Japanese former governor has just said, and there need to be some social practice and a social contract. There also need to be some expectations, and they need to be expected. So, Mr. Zhou, you have the floor first. Yes, indeed. And Shirakawa has said that whether or not the action was immediate and whether or not you have the courage, I think I agree with him, and I feel in the same way. If it's the regular fluctuation in the system, and if there is an external or stepwise shock from the external forces, we respond in different ways. Actually, for the shocks, you need, although the shock is great, but it will disappear very soon. So there are also theories to support the regulation and control. More difficult is the recycled fluctuation or the shock. It's like the economy is going upward and then downward. It's like a 360 degrees and a turn around. So if that's the case, your regulations, if it's lagging behind only slightly, it's not, the effect will not be good. And even in the worst case, you will add weight to the negative impact. So it means that if your intervention is lagging behind, it not only not help contain the problems, it will actually encourage the emergence of new problems. So timely intervention is important, but timeliness is very elusive. It's very hard to decide when it is. Because sometimes you need to have the data, and then we do the research, and the time will be wasted, and there will be a delay. And for example, a delay of several months. And for the regulatory measures, it's not like you are driving a car. It's not like a wheel, and it can be moderated very smoothly. So when you start to take the action, it may take months before you can see any effect. So first, you need to detect the signal, and then you need to design and study how to take what kind of interference measures will be taken, and then by the point the intervention measure taking effect. So there will definitely be a delay. And sometimes you may find your regulatory measures will not contribute to the macroeconomic stability, but actually increase its fluctuation. You may not like what I'm saying, but that is the fact. For example, in U.S., there are some fluctuations, and we are saying that the QE has been running for a long time, and you are already seeing the signs of the bad signs. But when you started to take action, it's already very late. But better late than ever, isn't it? So timeliness is critical. But how to make sure the intervention is timely? We need to have a very efficient feedback system or the forecast. So when you get the moment you get the data, it may already be 3 months behind. And you may still need to do some historical trend analysis, and you may need also a comparison. So it's best that you can forecast what's happening in the next 6 months. So means it is a pre-feedback, feed forward, not feedback. So it's important. For this feed forward, sometimes you got it correct, and sometimes you got it wrong. I mean your forecast. So it means sometimes you need to guide the flow of the expectation around 10 years ago in the BIS. Yellen, the Federal Reserve chairwoman of U.S. Yellen, they highly value the forward guidance. And in this forward guidance, the central bank need to forecast the future, but the market players also need to have a forecast. Then you will decide, and then there will be a competition. Who is more correct? The central banks, you cannot keep to the idea that I am the correct one and everyone should follow my and the leading. And that's against the economic rules. So that should not be so. Highly probably, the central banks may not have the correct forecast of the future and the trend. If you suppose that the central banks, even if you got it correct, if you got the forecast correct, and the more correct than the market players, than the market insiders, it's also possible that there are two possibilities. One is you have studied the financial history as well as you have a profound experience, or your calculation algorithm or your logic is better, and then the central bank. The other one is the other possibility is the data the central bank got is more than what's disclosed to the public. So that's the reason, and the central bank can be more correct than the market players. But that's not so possible here in modern world, because nowadays we have a greater transparency in the in the economic data, and almost all the data and have been made public almost immediately. Otherwise, there will be some not so good outcome. 10 years ago, when I was discussing with Yellen and other central governors, the Federal Reserve of America attached great importance to the forward forecast, and that's because the interest rate is already very high. There is no further room for the interest rate hike. So that's probably the reason, and we need to tell the market what we need to do as the central bank. But this applies only to a very specific short period. That's not so typical. If you emphasize the forward guidance or the macro regulation, it is to manage the public expectation as well as the market players' expectation. It is not so correct. It is wrong probably in itself. So for your question, I also see some discussions, and I can also cite examples, but I will not go to greater details.
Illuminating analysis on the communication with the public, and also very much on the forward guidance, a lot of insight there. We are happy that Governor Novaye is online just in time, as the timing is very good. And we have talked about the macro potential policy framework. We have talked about the right decision of the central bank and also the right timing. So Governor Novaye, we have a lot of questions for you, but we have very limited time, so maybe I will put them together to raise the question to you. The first one is about the right decision and right time for the central banks, especially for the Fed, and also for the ECB, and also for the BOE. We know they have chose to have a pause of the policy at this moment. And also at the same time, we have find some emerging market. Also, they are actually the cutting rates, and the BOJ is in different cycle of the monetary policy. So in your view, is for the advanced economies, is this kind of just a turning point? And more broadly for the monetary policy paradigm, we have talked quite a bit just now. Do you view this time maybe we need kind of, do you envisage a kind of paradigm shift for the central banking? Because we have a lot of new things here, regionalized GVC, and also we have priority on the security and politics over the economics and efficiency. So a lot of things has been changed today. So two questions. First, is this turning point and a paradigm shift of the money of the central banking? Governor Novaye, please. Governor, can you hear me? Yeah, we can hear you. Great.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for your question. I think the first thing we must have in mind is that the major central banks are really serious about bringing back inflation to 2%, because they fear that if they do not finish the job, inflation could surge again. And it would, in the end, disanchor inflation expectations, which were very well anchored in the past. So they really want to bring it back to 2%. It's likely that they have reached a peak in the tightening, or close to a peak. It's not completely clear at the moment, but they are probably close to the peak or at the peak. But yes, I believe that they will keep interest rates relatively high for as long as necessary to be sure that inflation comes back to around 2%. And that may mean that even if we see in the course of next year a first cut, it could take a long time before they achieve the course of decreasing interest rates. The second remark I would like to make is that the steady state of interest rates in the future will probably be very different from what we have experienced during the last decade. Because it's the reason why interest rates went so low is really that there were fears of deflation, inflation was close to zero. In some instances, it even went below zero for a short period of time. Not to speak of the situation of Japan, but Murasaki is better placed than myself to discuss that. But I think that in the future, if central banks manage to keep inflation around 2%, then normally the short-term interest rate should be slightly above 2% in a steady state in average. And as for long-term interest rates, the normal steady state would be inflation plus the potential growth plus a certain risk premium. So it probably means that long-term interest rates will be in the range of, say in Europe, for instance, between 3.5% and 5%. Which is very different from what we had during the last decade, and not so far from what we have now. So this is how I see things.
Yeah, thank you, Governor Novayekh. Very lucid elaboration on the future inflation. I'm wondering if Governor Zhou and Governor agree with this.
Chris Zhang, yeah, very nice to see you on the video. Talking about inflation targeting, talking about 2% inflation rate, we know that there is a general consensus on that. But however, in the condition that fiscal debt to GDP ratio has been quite high, especially after the global financial crisis. In many European countries, public debt to GDP ratio has been already over 100%. So people may worry that the fiscal authority need to use a relatively low interest rate condition to finance themselves to have a debt service easier. So in this kind of fiscal deficit, public debt to GDP ratio, that's how to balance what do you think that's to control inflation to the 2% and that's to maintain and public debt sustainable and to gradually resolve the higher debt to GDP ratio problem.
Yeah, very, very good question. Governor Novayekh, would you like to respond very quickly and briefly because we have run out of time? Do we need a lower interest rate or maybe higher interest rate and for the fiscal deficit issue and other issue, please? Would you like to comment a little bit on Governor Zhou's question?
If you're asking the question to myself, yes, I understand the reasoning of Zhou Shuan on the need to finance governments. Of course, if we have an inflation of around 2%, it means that plus the average growth that we'll hopefully enjoy in the future, it means that tax revenues will increase also by 2-3% per year at the minimum without changing anything. And therefore, this will increase the revenues of the government and help to finance the interest rates that the governments will have to pay on their debt. So I think in a steady state, there is no incompatibility between having normal interest rates given the growth and the inflation and the stabilized inflation at 2%, and avoids that the debt increases by itself. Of course, it means that the governments will have to consolidate their public finance, being closer to a balance of the budget. Which in a steady state, if you go at potential and have the inflation stabilized around 2%, is not too difficult normally.
Yeah, thank you, Governor Novayer. And maybe eventually we will grow out of the debt, or maybe we will inflate out of the debt. Governor,
okay.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Up until recently, many central banks were talking about low inflation or the zero lower bound of interest rate. Now we are talking about high inflation, and we are talking about how to reduce inflation rate to 2%. So in that sense, the world seems to have changed. But at the same time, I still have a lingering thought about for what direction the global economy is heading for. On the one hand, there are many factors which pushes inflation rate up. For instance, the globalization, and the rapid aging, which reduce labor supply, resulting in high inflation. And also, the response to the climate change, which means increase in relative price of activity, which emissions carbon. So all these are factors causing inflation. But at the same time, we also have to know the basic trend of the society, and that is declining population. And the declining population means that the domestic market will continue to shrink. And if people have that kind of expectation, then the investment will tend to be weaker than otherwise. And supply is determined by current labor condition, but the demand, especially investment, will be determined by future prospect of population. This is the factors causing deflation. So my answer to your question is, I don't know. There are many factors, and anyway, we have to be watchful about what would happen in future.
Yeah, Governor Shirakawa, thank you very much. Actually, I have a lot of questions in my mind, and I want to raise this question to these three great minds of the central banking area. But actually, we have used up all the time. So, 我还有很多问题想问哈。
So we do have a lot of questions, but we are running out of time. So I'd like to thank everyone. Thank the great minds present here today. You have been working in the central banks, and so we have in-depth discussions about the practices and series at the central banks. So we need to look back into the past to think about what we have currently. So after listening to illustrations, I believe all of you have harvested a lot of knowledge and information. So I think it's going to inspire the policies in the future. Thank you for.
Governor Zhou Xiaochuan, thank Governor Masaki Shirahara, and also thank you, Governor Christian Novayer. And this conclude our session. Thank you very much. Please join me with applause. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Please be seated. 我们请两位行长台下就坐。
好的，我们也再次感谢。
So again, let's thank Zhou Xiaochuan, Christian Noah, and Mr. Masaki Shirakawa. I'd like to thank Mr. Yang for your hosting this part of the session. So They really brought us a very important feast of thoughts and ideas, which gives us more expectations for the future of the world economy. I'd like to thank you again. So we are about to conclude the 2023 Financial Street Conference. We have harvested a friendship, and also we felt a responsibility on our shoulders for the future development of the financial street. We're filled with expectations. So now let's invite Mayor of Beijing Municipality, Mr. Ying, to deliver a closing speech.
Vice Chairman Zhou Xiaochuan, Professor Shirakawa, Governor Noya, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. In this early winter, the season for accumulating strength for the future, the annual conference of the Financial Street Forum 2023 has successfully completed all its agenda and is about to come to a close. On behalf of the organizing committee of the forum, I would like to express sincere gratitude to the co-hosts, including the People's Bank of China, the National Financial Regulatory Administration, the China Securities Regulatory Commission, Xinhua News Agency, and the State Administration of Foreign Exchange. I would also like to thank the 41 co-organizers, the distinguished guests who attended the forum both online and offline, and friends from all walks of life who have provided support and assistance for the successful organization of the forum. This year's annual conference fully implemented the guiding principles set at the Central Financial World Conference and deeply grasped the requirement for the financial sector to provide quality services for socioeconomic development, with the theme of Better China, Better World, enhancing financial openness and cooperation for shared growth and mutual benefits. The forum invited over 400 important guests from more than 30 countries and regions worldwide. It featured 42 high-quality events, including the main forum, parallel forums, and the FinTech conference. The forum provided a platform for in-depth exchanges of cutting-edge ideas, sharing of successful experiences, and joint planning of cooperation blueprints, resulting in fruitful outcomes. Firstly, it widely conveyed our confidence and determination in openness and cooperation, facing changes in the world, the times, and history. We adhere to inclusive progress and open sharing. For the first time, we invited a large number of overseas guests to participate offline, with extensive participation from the BRI cooperation countries. The 3 overseas subsections in Hong Kong, Dubai, and Singapore interacted with the main venue in Beijing. Over 6,000 participants attended offline from around the world, and online viewership exceeded 400 million. Prominent guests such as Governor Pan Gongsheng, Minister Li Yunze, Chairman Yi Huiman, President Fu Hua attended and delivered speeches, sharing profound insights into China's unique path of financial development. They expressed China's firm commitment to further integrating into globalization, steadily expanding institutional opening up in the financial sector, and enhancing facilitation of cross-border investment and financing. They vividly portrayed the promising prospects of doing business and achieving success in China to financial institutions and various long-term capital providers worldwide. Secondly, it demonstrated the depth and breadth of professional discussions. Experts and scholars from various industries and fields expressed their views and thoughts on the regular, trending, and cutting-edge issues related to the financial industry development. They talked about strengthening macro policy dialogues, enhancing the framework and paradigm for global economic and financial resilience, exploring various feasible approaches to deepening capital market reforms and enhancing capital market functions. They thoroughly analyzed the real and potential opportunities of deep integration between the digital economy and the real economy, as well as the creation of new engines for financial services. Multiple strategies and approaches were discussed for improving the quality of trade and investment cooperation. The diverse and brilliant opinions sparked intellectual exchanges. providing important insights and valuable lessons for global financial collaboration and win-win development. Third, it effectively promoted the implementation of multiple research results, focusing on key issues such as improving the financial sector, optimizing financial services, advancing high-level financial opening up, and preventing and resolving risks. More than 30 significant outcomes were achieved from various aspects, including policy norms, initiative agreements, research reports, indexes, platform cases, and selections. In particular, considering social concerns and media attention, important achievements such as the Beijing Initiative for Global Development Opportunities through consultation and sharing, the Memorandum of Understanding on Deepening Cooperation on Fintech Innovation, Regulation in the Guangdong-Hong Kong-Macau Greater Bay Area, the Guide to Financial Digitization Maturity, and the Guidelines for Information Disclosure on the Financial Application of AI algorithm released. With the establishment of the Financial Street Contact Point of the Legislative Work Committee of the NPC Standing Committee and operation of the Financial Risk Monitoring Center, the Financial Street Forum's role as a national-level platform for authoritative financial policy releases was further highlighted. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, as the National Financial Management Center, Beijing has always placed high-quality development of the financial industry in an important position. The financial industry accounts for about 20% of the city's GDP and fiscal revenue, making it the largest pillar industry of the capital's economy. We will cherish and make good use of the achievements of this forum, steadily promote the high-level opening and development of the financial industry, and accelerate the construction of a modern financial system with Beijing characteristics, making due contributions to the construction of a strong financial country. First, we will serve the functions of the National Financial Management Center with higher standards. We'll closely align with the development needs of national financial regulators such as the Central Bank, the NFRA, and the CSRC. Actively attract more domestic and foreign financial institutions to establish a presence in Beijing, improve the financial work system with the best standards, and play a greater role in financial decision-making, standard setting, payment settlement, financial rule of law, and other aspects. Second, we will plan the open development of the financial industry with a broader vision. Will further leverage the strength of the National Integrated Demonstration Zone for opening up the services sector and the China-Beijing Pilot Free Trade Zone, emphasizing both bringing in and going global. Will take the lead in financial market opening, cross-border capital flow, investment and finance facilitation, and create a new pace setter for two-way financial opening. Third, we will vigorously promote financial services for the capital's real economy. We will accelerate the improvement of a multi-tiered capital market and support the expansion and improvement of the Beijing Stock Exchange. We'll focus on 5 key areas: technology finance, green finance, inclusive finance, pension finance, and digital finance, guiding more financial resources to be used for promoting technological innovation, advanced manufacturing, green development, and small and medium-sized enterprises. Fourth, we will maintain the financial security and stability of the capital with stricter requirements. We'll improve the multi-tiered risk prevention and control system, enhance the effectiveness of financial regulation, strengthen the implementation of local financial risk disposal responsibilities, prevent and diffuse risks in key areas, and firmly guard against systemic financial risks. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, the annual conference of this forum is about to come to a successful conclusion, and Beijing will continue to forge ahead in the new journey in building a socialist modern country in all respects. With anticipation and hope for the future, let us continue to strengthen financial opening up, deepen international cooperation, and inject stronger financial impetus into the long-term stable development of the economy. Once again, thank you all for your strong support during the preparation and hosting of the forum. Thank you. In the end, I announce the closure of the annual conference of the Financial Street Forum 2023. Thank you all.
2023金融街论坛年会圆满结束，感谢中国工商银行、北京银行、中国光大银行、中国人寿、中国人民保险对本届论坛年会的大力支持，感谢各位来宾出席，期待明年再会。
The annual conference of Financial Street Forum 2023 has successfully concluded. Special thanks to Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, Bank of Beijing, China Everbright Bank, China Life, the People's Insurance Company Group of China Limited for their great support to the annual conference. Thank you all for your attendance, and we look forward to seeing you again next year.